All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry. I was late. I was hanging up clothes, and then I just started talking with Skank about his his live stream with Daniel, which happened last night, whatever.
Wednesday. But
Anyhow, I don't know why I didn't even see it.
sorry,
I'm
it's
gonna
literally like the third thing that's an exclusive to my channel. So if you haven't
okay
found it, I don't blame anybody.
here. I put it. That's it. Go check it out. It's really. I'm not done with it yet, but that's why we're late. Is I just started talking to Skank about that and.
Yeah, and I could have kept going because that combo, like he just lit a fire under us who wrote the zine. We are so inspired and ready to do more.
He's a he's an interesting dude. And who was I? He gets around too. I have no idea how he has the time to do everything he's doing because he's also got a family. He's doing all his own stuff. He's talking to a lot of us. He's apparently talking to Ross Bird, I heard, because I was just listening to
Nice.
Ethan and Ross Bird. And so he's like, I was talking to Daniel Garner, and I'm like, God, this guy's like everywhere. Um, all right, let's actually talk about what we plan on talking about though, because I don't know when I realized that you have some familiarity or background with anarchism, punk, and it's not just because you live in the Pacific Northwest, but what is your background with punk and anarchism?
I mean, I've always liked punk music. Punk is an aesthetic. At least
Right.
once I was sort of like comfortable enough to diverge from the unconscious kind of like cultural norms of Big Eva Christianity. Once I realized once I kind of realized like no, I like this thing regardless of what they say I should or shouldn't like. That was sort of like one of the
Mhm.
big self assertion of you know one that was one means which I used to kind of understand who I was at a deeper level. And
Yeah.
it's an important moment when you realize that um the culture you grew up in doesn't get to completely and totally define you. You have to start asserting yourself a little bit. And it's been like one really meaningful. I'm not gonna. And we'll talk too much about like the punk scene specifically, but I really think that um, one of the reasons my personal meaning crisis was not as bad as it could have been was because I was pretty consistently going to shows and having a communal, embodied. I mean, I won't quite call it a practice, but it was something that grounded me when intellectually my life was going off the rails.
It's a religious ritual, going to
Yeah,
concerts.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Abs- Absolutely. I even have a yearly pilgrimage now to the Supernova International Ska Festival in Hampton, Virginia.
Yeah, so that's a particular genre of punk. I mean, there's like many subgenres, I suppose, of punk, like punk ska.
Hmm.
Um, that's probably like more of a nerdy musical one. It's people who like grew up playing instruments stuff like band kids. Feel like always got into
Yes,
ska.
100%. Yep. I mean, that was the only genre that had any use for them,
Yeah.
and especially when it kind of like melded with punk, they were like, "Wait, I can go from nerdy to kind of cool. Maybe that's so yeah, I'll jump on that train."
Yeah. I
And
was
then the
always
world turned, and for the last 10 years, like the culture, like just is constantly shitting on the ska genre. Like if you go to like hardtimes.com, every week they will throw another like ska jab in there because we have been the punching bag for 15 years
Would
after the
you say
bubble burst.
that's your favorite thing? Because this is like I love so Jason's in here, My Chemical Romance. So that's like emo, screamo, kind of punky music a little bit. But ska sucks. Okay. Jason's
We
also
know.
Jason was also recently touring in like I think it was a heavy metal band. Jason's a musical dude. Makes a lot of his own music and stuff too. Ska's good life. I'm a big sucker for like I love it when bands do and we'll get back to anarchism and punk, but
Mhm,
because I want to know the connection between those two too, actually. So table that for a second. But I was gonna say I
mhm.
love jam bandy bands that are good enough and they have enough cohesion musically where you'll go to a concert. Like the ideal one for me is for a long time I was a big Ryan Adams fan, and then I just not Brian Adams, Ryan Adams. That's always the thing. And are you familiar with him?
Not especially.
Okay, so but he had it was actually right before my oldest was born. He was coming through Minneapolis. I tried to get tickets, couldn't get tickets. And then so then my wife and I and some friends actually carpooled out to Red Rocks in Colorado and saw him at Red Rocks. And this is when he was touring with the Cardinals, which was this like band that he toured, because a lot of times he was playing solo, but he was with the Cardinals for a long time. And they put out like 3 albums in 1 year. Like I always called the Ryan Adams trilogy or Trinity. And and at this concert, it was one of those things where they were just playing. He apparently called it, like they had a name for it. He called it the Blue Zone, where they would like go into this meld. It was like a Borg musical mind meld. And they were playing the albums, but then they would play them in a way where they're changing time signatures and like flowing them into each other, where like you couldn't even really tell what the song was. And then all of a sudden, me and my buddy, it's kind of this fun game where you play where you're like, all of a sudden you'd like figure out what the song was, and you're just like, blah! It's like this another level of fun musical
That's
thing.
amazing. And
Yeah.
that's just musicianship at another level.
Yeah, those are fun. And it was, I don't know, that was an iconic trip for me because my wife was like 8 months pregnant in like a road trip across the country. She's just, super pregnant at the concert. We stopped at my parents' house in South Dakota and one of my friends, and then my dad's just like showing them all his guns. And these are people who are not familiar with guns. And then one of my friends like grabbed this pistol and he like shot the pistol into the floor of like the upstairs of my house. And while like my pregnant wife and my mother were downstairs, and everybody's like, kind of what happened? And then my dad is just kind of like, oops. He's like, they're all loaded.
No point in them not being.
Yeah. And then my friend was just like traumatized and just like, I'm going to bed. And he just like went in the room and just like laid down and went to sleep. Anyway. What's the connection between punk and anarchism?
I mean, I think as a whole, especially before it got like especially like mainstream with like the punk world, like punk as a genre is pretty closely aligned with anarchism as a political philosophy. I mean, it's famously like aggressive, famously defiant, and very stick it to the man. Gosh, I have no idea where it is, but there was an incredible like phrasing from some of the Cyberpunk reading I did, where it's just like basically punk is this sort of like giant like howling yap of defiance against everything that has created this current cultural moment.
Yeah.
Even going so far as to like deforming your own body because you can see your own body as sort of being responsible for producing this moment. So it's just, I hate the situation right now, and I also hate everything that is responsible for this in any way whatsoever in its most extreme form.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that punk, at least punk music, but maybe punk culture too, and punk art is like it's like a creative pre-doomerism? Because like that's what you were just saying. It's just like, fuck all this. Like this sucks. But yet they're doing something with it, although in the kind of Pageauian sense, it is, I don't know that you can't really base a society on punk.
Right. I think the reason why it doesn't rise to the level of an ism is because it was such a small kind of like subculture. Like it was big enough, and they kind of punched above their weight just because they were intentionally going for shock value like all of the time, and so they were drawing a ton of attention to themselves, but it was never particularly huge. And also one of the things that you see now, if you kind of like keep going to shows and see some of the punk legacy bands and just do some people watching at festivals, you get a decent picture of how this is not a sustainable culture. Like if you like fully tap into the thing without reservation, it will destroy you.
Yeah, just because it's rebellious, by nature, I suppose. Yeah. So then somewhat, and maybe it's kind of like you know, the hippies of like the 60s and 70s, or a certain kind of the hippie, not like the Sherry live off the land homesteading hippie, but like the anti-Vietnam hippies. But then they became like the, you know, the rich corporatist boomers, you know, as they aged, where like it's the young people going to punk concerts and it's just like, yeah, stick it to the man. But it's just like, dude, you own a company, you know?
I saw the Blue Man Group in Vegas 20 years ago. When my grandparents took me on a big kind of like legacy road trip. It was sort of a coming age trip they took all of us on. And Blue Man Group, they played a version of I think White Rabbit by, I want to say it's Jefferson Airplane, maybe. I don't know. But you know, total boomer music. And one of the jokes that they had on like a placard was like, look around at all of the bankers and the yuppies that are singing along to the music right now. 20 years ago, they were radical hippies, kids. Pay attention. And
Yeah. So what do you, do you still, would you identify as being punk? How much of that is still in you?
I will say that I like it, and there's something deep in me that does enjoy it, and so that's meaningful. But I generally eschew a lot of identities. Like it's
a very punk thing to do.
Yeah, sure. And it's also like it's become like everything in the last like 10 years, and I'm like I am far like first off, I don't think identity is really something that is subject to your own will and choice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
insofar as this is something that speaks to me, it is, yeah, it's a part of me and it's meaningful to me. But I'm more interested in asking the question of like, what are we versus who are we? Because I think what we are is still far less determined than we think it is.
Talk more about that. I don't know that I've ever thought about that question. I'm just thinking like, what does that mean?
Well, some of it's just a, more like paying closer attention to like what it means to be a human animal. And I think a lot of the identities are a way for us to kind of contain the less defined thing that it is to be a human being. And I think more asking the question like, what am I? And then rather than making decisions that kind of curtail your range of choices, noticing what in the world kind of like calls you out, what draws you out. I think that's a better way of actually understanding what you are.
Yeah. It's kind of like the question, this is actually reminding me of the stream with Daniel, but it's kind of like the question of what moves you. And that distinct, because we were talking about this before we started, but he was saying good writing. One of the rules, the third rule or whatever, good writing, I put in the timestamp. It's a great section, but he was saying is that it's kind of like when you read, there's certain things that you'll read where they don't create visuals for you, but then there's other stuff that you read where it's just like, it's a movie. There's like a movie playing in your mind. And I think that is much more like the question of what moves you or what are you, like the animal thing. And he illustrated it by using a couple of sentences. Like one of them was, it was something like Ibrahim touched their shoulder or something versus like, which he says is an abstraction. Like that's just an idea in your head, which is kind of the same thing of who are you? It's an abstraction versus like the fingers went down the spot, the scapula of the shoulder until it cupped and you felt the warmth. Like that is a felt, sensual visual that's a lot more rooted and grounded in like a what.
Yeah. There's one, this is just complete and total rabbit trail, and I'm going to cut off in a second here, but one area of like philosophy history that's really, really interesting is the history of emotions. When you come to grips with the fact that like the names we put to certain emotions or passions have changed pretty not dramatically, but they've changed subtly over time. And so even the things that we think are kind of like common human feelings throughout, like a lot of the difference across time is kind of papered over by the labels that we use for emotions. And a lot's helpful as an entry point, but if you really want to dig into like being a good, sensitive historical reader, you got to learn to be open to the fact that like Homer's characters don't feel the way that we feel. Their subjectivity is dramatically different.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's very, very true. That's very often well, and to not go into a bigger, different rabbit trail. First, I want to I want to ask if you have any examples, but then I was also thinking that's one of my big problems with like a certain historical critical approach to any sort of text, whether it's literature or history, is I'm just like, you can't, we're not the same thing. And I don't know that you can even get in, like what were they thinking? Even like the idea of authorial intent biblically, I'm just like, you're not going to do that. like you can't get there. It's not, I don't know that it's possible. I mean, to some degree, I mean, I'm not saying there's not like closer and further away. It's not like completely arbitrary, but you can't like one-to-one map it.
Yeah, no, you have to be much more open to the fact that you're not going to fully understand somebody, especially if there's traumatic distances between you, which time does and culture also does. And I will give you one big example, just biblically, like shame. Shame in the West is completely different from shame in the East and shame in an ancient Mediterranean context.
Yeah.
So I'm sure one of these days I'll finally like loop Nick Freewilling and we'll have our trashing Brene Brown stream, because she is great as on the topic of shame, I guess, if you restrict it to like white upper class culture. But from at least I've only really interacted with her on like the TED Talk level, but shame is painted almost exclusively negatively. And she's also admitted that honestly, like she doesn't even account for how shame is experienced by the, masculine versus feminine.
Yeah.
Like she's gotten masculine pushback and she's like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah. That's I'm not that familiar with, I mean, I'm like barely familiar with Brene Brown, but that is it's an interesting thing. Well, that's even Matt C will talk about that a lot. Shame culture versus what's the characteristic? Shame culture versus what would he say more like the West?
So there's honor and shame versus guilt innocence.
Guilt
is one of the, and then we won't get into this one. And then there's also like a third big bucket that's important to add in there, which is fear power culture. But we'll have to say that for a different conversation because we can go on for a long time about that.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back
back to the thumbnail here.
Back to punk and anarchism. Do you? So, would you say that you think anarchism and Christianity are compatible?
Yes, absolutely. Or there is a way to be anarchist Christianly or Christian anarchistically. Yes, there is if we want to pull in Daniel, there's definitely a girdle point coherent system where those two are very simpatico. What we'll get into as we talk here is that it's really part of the challenge here is that a lot of kind of like contemporary Christian anarchists have the temptation to sort of ride the coattails of non-Christian anarchists to subsidize their lifestyle. Yeah. And so there are profound costs to Christian anarchism that currently you don't have to pay necessarily in the affluent West. Yeah.
The dumpster diving Christian anarchist.
I mean, those are people that are trying to actually trying to live it out and actually trying to pay the costs to pay the cost for what their ideology, their convictions call them to.
Yeah, to some degree, but yet I'm just saying they're like it's not outside of the corporate West. There's no dumpsters to dive in,
Yeah, I mean, like part of the thing is like the power of our ability to interpret things. Like they can see themselves as trying to like almost redeem some of the waste of capitalist agriculture. And so that's, given the situation that we're in, this is actually a way to actually be part of repairing the world through letting less things go to waste.
Right, for sure. And I'm on board with that. I mean, that's part of why I like even one of the compromises that I have in my life all the time, because I hate kind of fast fashion clothing, consumeristic crap. And so like that's why I like thrifting or something. Like if I can find clothes that are thrifted, I feel like I'm doing at least I'm not like voting with my dollar for more production of just crap stuff that's going to end up in a landfill. Like right now I took my Christmas lights down yesterday or whatever, and every stupid, because it was like 70 degrees here or something ridiculous, but every year these dumb squirrels, they like will chew through the Christmas lights, and I'm just like, I don't want to, number one, I don't want to buy a new string of Christmas lights or 2 or 3 every stupid year because of these stupid squirrels. Yeah, Jason, the stupid squirrels that you feed, and you were trying to buy a squirrel. He had a squirrel palace on his wedding registry. And he feeds them nuts outside of his house. He's an asshole. But, so they chew holes. So right now I have them downstairs where I'm like, I go back and repair them. This is one of those things where like I'll go and repair these stupid Christmas lights and try to weave them back together without creating a fire. And my wife is just, that's just like one of the ways where my wife is just like, you're a crazy person. But I'm just like, what do you like? I either have to do something like that. I either have to live in this world in a way where like I don't destroy my soul, or I have to just go homestead or something, you know.
Yeah. Something that's going to like come up a lot in this discussion, and something you got to keep in the back of mind is the level of like complicity that you have with the dominant social order, and that's something that you're always gotta negotiate. And that's asking the question like, how complicit am I? One can just drive you crazy, and two, it's something you just have to dance with and argue with. To make sure that again, like your punk or anarchist ideas aren't just luxury beliefs. Again, the sort of thing that you believe, that you hold, but you don't pay the cost for them, and they actually like degrade the world around you outside of your field of vision.
Right. But I mean, that's kind of so that's one of the big pushbacks that, because whenever I've spoken about anarchism, or pacifism or any of those things, that is like pretty much the automatic retort. We're like, I know it's coming. It's just countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here it comes, which is like, well, you have all these people doing the dirty work for you. Like they're essentially saying it is a luxury belief. And to some degree it is. It's kind of like that idea. Anarchism is kind of like one of those ideas of like, it's never been tried or whatever, like successful, like the ideal anarchism has never been tried. Actually, a film I've been wanting to rewatch is The Ballad of Jack and Rose, which is kind of talks about this, where it's like an old Daniel Day-Lewis film where it's like a small scale communist thing where like they go live they live on like some island on the East Coast in like a small scale commune. And it doesn't work. It's one of those things where like your pure vision of this thing like is never going to really work right. So how do you, back to your point though, of I think it is true, how do you balance that, negotiate the difference between the dominant overarching culture and how complicit you are with that? I mean, how do you do that?
I mean, here is where you'll agree with me and everyone else will hate it, but like that's just something that you have to discern. Like that's something that deals with like your own conscience, deals with like the specific life that you lead. And like part of the thing, I think a lot of anarchism is very, I know, well, some of it can be very like personalist in that it's trying to live below the corporate level as much as possible, to not like pay into that system, to not reap the benefits from that system. But that's more an invitation to like, how do you actually like construct your lived life? And that's going to be different from person to person to person.
Yeah. To some degree, do you remember when Jordan Peterson was speaking about like and I think this is true, but when he was talking about, let's say, communist Russia or even like Nazi Germany, he was saying really what those things are before they become authoritarian government totalizing systems and ideologies. He's like, essentially it's everyone complicitly participating in that larger energy until it gets to the point where it got there. So it's kind of like whatever the larger, and I suppose that's the thing that we have to navigate, you know. It's kind of like because we'll talk about economics, or like Christian Smith comes up in TLC conversation sometimes where he's just like, that is the thing with like a free market or capitalism, is like it'll give the people what they want, but then you have to be careful of like what the people actually want, because that's a lot of what we're living in right now. Is people will this is how I often feel, is people like will complain about the state of the world, and I'm like, this is what we created. We're living in the world that we want on one level, because that's the world that we have been complicit in. And I think that's for me, that's a lot of my punk anarchist thing, is like, I do try to do that. Like my wife says, one of her things is like, I'll support you in whatever way you want to torture yourself, because I
that's love, right?
Yeah.
That's universalist love.
because it's like, because I do that kind of stuff, like whether it's fasting or cold showers sometimes, or whatever, doing these really hard, ridiculous things. Like anytime we want to buy something, like it's a pain in the ass, because I make it a pain in the ass. Like there's a story, she wanted to buy a watch once, and I like started going and getting involved with her in it, and it ended with her in tears and just being like, I just want to watch. You know? And it's, but I don't know how to, that's my navigating of it, because it just feels so, but then that's something I have to navigate, you know, in my own personal relationships. Like I can't be such an idealistic asshole that, because they're connected to me, but maybe they don't want to pay all the costs that I want to pay, you know?
Right. You know, that's the other thing, is reckoning with like the network that you're connected to, and the fact that your choices like bounce back on them. Like you're making decisions that other people have to pay for.
If the corner's leftist Islamophile turn is a luxury belief. I actually like, that's another thing Daniel was talking about in I'm going to keep just referencing it, but the live stacks or Skank's live stream, where is it?
This one. I talked to OG Rose on my channel.
On your channel, yeah.
Recently launched technically 2 days ago. I talked to OG Rose. I had him come and give us some zine criticism, and he was just absolutely delightful.
Yeah, it was great, because that's one of the things that he said in there was when you're, one of the challenges of writing, and it's really difficult, is that when you can, this is just a little aside, we're going to get back to anarchism, but when you write about another religion, you don't want to just, essentially you're trying to steel man it or something. You don't want to talk about it in a way where it becomes just like a trope, or it's a foil. Like you have to talk about it in a way that's actually alive and real. It's almost like the difference between the abstraction of touching your shoulder versus like you have to like feel it. You have to engage with it. You have to wrestle with it.
Well, he said something so counterintuitive that it kind of like blew my mind. Whereas like, actually, he says so often we are trying to describe them in a way that is pleasing and acceptable and approved by the people that are describing. And that's generally kind of like steel manning behavior. But he says, actually, like you're actually serving difference if you describe them in a way that is true and faithful, but that they don't recognize.
That they
see
where you can
thing. Yes, yeah, that they can see themselves in a new light.
Yeah.
That
if you could do that for both like Christian and Muslim audiences, writing about cyberpunk Islam, that might be like that's like the ultimate.
Yeah, but that also requires way more time, attention, and research than the 2 months we've been working on this project.
Right. I
Uh,
mean, listen, it's slow growth, right? You're not gonna nail it first time.
yeah.
All right. So do you what? So both practically for yourself in your
Here, tell
life,
you what,
right?
why don't I go into story time for a couple of minutes
Do
and
it.
kind of trace my journey? That way you can see sort of like, the
Yeah.
specific concrete way I kind of got into this world. Because
Perfect.
yeah. So I guess it started in college, I suppose. And like with so many folks that end up anarchists, of course, it all comes back to Ron Paul. And so I was in college 05 to 09. There we go. I'm going to date myself, pushing 40 here. And yeah, Ron Paul was like the big Ron Paul moment. And so I was also, college student, so young, idealistic. And he was saying things that were like, he was somebody, if nothing else, who appeared to be like a deeply principled man who was very consistent, who garnered a lot of respect from us, and seemed to be like a persistent prophetic voice in American politics that did the sort of kind of like going back to like the Protestant, going back to the sources. Let's reclaim the vision of, like Jefferson, this American conception of freedom, things like that. That was all very appealing to me. And also it was divergent enough from my parents that I could also, it was a good container for that sort of like intuitive need to, differentiate myself from the world I grew up in, stick it to my parents a little bit and be like, I'm not like you, Dad.
Yeah. Were your parents
And
more
so,
neocon-y?
yeah. Yeah, I went to Liberty University. Actually, we had Ron Paul speak at Liberty University while I was there. And which I and Liberty University is famously, that's the university that's founded by Jerry Falwell, who was a big Take America Back for God. I guess you could call him a theocon from like the 70s and the 80s. He's credited with being one of the radio speakers that was pretty instrumental in Ronald Reagan's rise, securing a lot of kind of like Christian votes for him and stuff like that. So he was very much, you can see analogies between that and sort of like MAGA today, if you'd like. I'm not here to, talk so coarsely about American politics, but there's connections and relationships, and it's a certain kind of what we might now today call Christian nationalism. That's another fraught term. So it was really interesting to have somebody close to anarchism like Ron Paul, who also is a Christian Baptist medical doctor, speaking on Liberty's campus. But so that was influential, and I started reading a bunch of stuff to kind of like provide some intellectual backdrop to these ideas that had caught my attention and seemed to coalesce with who I thought I was. So I was reading guys like Thoreau and starting to get all involved in like civil disobedience, or appreciate like principled stands against current governmental practices. Started to appreciate the fact that you can honorably and faithfully disobey in a way that's pretty like faithful with my own kind of like Christian convictions. Then I went away to seminary, and at the time, so this is also early, like late George W. Bush, early Obama era. And one of the things that was happening up in the intellectual sphere a little bit is there were certain Christian pacifists that were getting pretty popular. And one of my professors kind of like offhandedly mentioned that there's this guy, Stanley Hauerwas, who is interesting and he's worth reading. Have you read any Hauerwas?
No, but I know a lot. I know a lot about him. Julian Waldner would always talk to me about Hauerwas.
Yeah, he was deeply influential for me. So this is a guy who, he's like a Texas Methodist who I don't even know how he got kind of like wrapped up in the pacifist theme, but he was for me like super influential because he was both like a pacifist, and he's also my introduction to like Thomas Aquinas and the virtues. And so he ended up being like a theological ethicist. So his whole deal is, I'm telling a story. We're not providing definitions. This is Personalist Corner, really. And you sit down.
I was just reading
Definitions constrain, man.
I was just looking a little bit into this with like Ellul, because Ellul is like known as like one of the huge Christian anarchists out there, and I'm just like just looking at summaries of his ideas. I'm like, yeah, that's like everything, I think, basically. But so yeah, we're telling stories. So you seminary Hauerwas.
Yep. And so I started reading like Hauerwas, and then started tracking back like his influence as well. And Hauerwas is interesting because it was really, really helpful, because this was the first time I came across a thinker that I wanted to read and just couldn't quite get into, like couldn't like understand the world that he was inhabiting, the world that he was describing. He's got a very like specific and distinct way of speaking and writing, in part because I think he's trying to push back against American individualism. So he is consistently trying to speak in a way that is more kind of like corporate body oriented, and is concerned less for, like your thoughts and motives so much as your actions and the actual witness you are presenting to the world. And so,
right. And that quick aside, I just had this idea. To me, almost like that's probably a difference between, because like Phlebas was even saying this about liberty. To me, libertarianism almost feels a lot more individualistic, whereas like anarchism feels way more personalist, relational to me. But
again, depends on the breed of anarchism.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of forms of, I think some of the early, like memes of American liberty like fit into a personalist mode. Jefferson's yeoman farmers, a certain self-sufficient independence that are also like, upstanding members of your community.
Yeah.
There are Christian ways to be all of these, unfortunately, because we are incarnational, so we can embody just about anything. And who knows, maybe we are going to embody everything before the eschaton.
Right. Christianity has it's that whole you got to say somewhat that there's unity and multiplicity. It's not just like a colonizing replicant Borg-like religion. So yeah, there's different ways to be a Christian. So, all right, Hauerwas Seminary. Next step.
Yep. Oh no, Phlebas found me out. Yeah, no, because I started reading Hauerwas, he ended up being influenced by the Mennonites, and so
they're related, in my opinion.
No. I mean, well, he was not explicitly, but he ended up getting coming under the wing of like the rock star of all rock star Mennonite scholars of the last 20 years, who now lives in infamy because he was a rat bastard. But I started reading Hauerwas, and then I mean we'll name him, but just recognize like for those of you that heard the name, yes, I know all of the stories, and I can't help the fact that the guy influenced me. But John Howard Yoder is the guy who was was incredibly influential. Like the big book he wrote that some of you might have heard of is called The Politics of Jesus. And this is the thing that really, this was the book that kind of like pushed me further into the world rather than repelling me. Because one of the big things starting in undergrad, because I initially was planning to be a pastor, so I was going to Jesus school to learn ministerial stuff, and caught the Old Testament and the Hebrew book. So I've been a Hebrew nerd and OT nerd for since like late high school. That was sort of one of the first things that really kind of caught my attention. And again, personality wise, I'm somebody who is attracted to the strange and the weird versus repelled by, which is why I hang out with you folks. And the Old Testament was always, again, like it's, once you start digging into it, I'm like, what is this doing here? I don't see how this, like, there's not an easy and direct correlation between the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. And when you really recognize that there is a substantial difference between the two, you have a choice. You can either kind of use the New Testament to completely like overwrite, let the New Testament provide all of the categories and just interpret it exclusively through the New Testament. And there's some denominations that turn that dial up higher than I like to go. And my conviction has pretty much always been let it be weird, let it be strange, and try and understand it on its own terms. And part of the weirdness and the strangeness is it's a lot easier to be a pacifist if you're like a New Testament supremacist. But if you're somebody who also is like, well, if this is also scripture, if this is also the word of God, and I think without getting into massive doctrinal statements, if the Hebrew Bible is a book that will reliably tell you the truth about God, then that is going to make it really difficult to talk about like absolute prohibitions on violence, just because of all of the different stories in like Joshua and Judges and Samuel. And so I was just, when I started reading Hauerwas, so just kind of like playing around with the world, and like, this is kind of interesting, but I'm not really going to, like, I'm probably not going to fall full bore into this. And then I read Yoder, and his one particular chapter kind of walking through the Old Testament gave a pretty kind of like critical reading of the Old Testament, but that also like deeply attended to the text in a way that helped me to really, really see that, oh, okay, he's not throwing the book away like I was afraid any pacifist might do. And he's actually forcing me to see things I had not noticed before. And so I was just compelled by, what's that?
What were some of those things?
The biggest thing is he talked about he traced this sort of like developmental logic to the Old Testament, that basically, like, if you look closely at the Old Testament, you can read it as a story where God is consistently drawing them out of a world of violence as the norm to a world that has an abhorrence for violence. So you can see it as something sort of like a Tom Holland thesis of like the old, like, you know, Genesis plants a seed that grows into something that is much more peaceable than the outer shell appears to be.
Yeast leavening the loaf or whatever.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Preston Sprinkle, who I'm quasi friends with, although he ghosts me all the time. But that's his book. He's kind of been in the corner a little bit, but he has his book is called, it used to be called Fight. I'm sharing the screen, but he does the same thing in that, where it's called Nonviolence, the Revolutionary Way of Jesus. But he, it's not just the New Testament thing though, too. He does the same thing in the Old Testament, where he's like, there's kind of this ebb and flow where there's no king, and then there becomes tribes and kings. It's very related to kind of a spiral dynamic way of looking at it too. And then, like, one of the things that was big for me, because you think very much in terms of kings and nations and nation states, and and he said, you know, when Israel first asked for a king, that was where he was like, no, you don't need a king. Like, I'm your king. But they're like everybody else. They wanted to be like everybody else. And so he's like, okay, then he acquiesced and gave them a king, but it wasn't like a prescription from God to have a king. So it wasn't like, in that sense, it wasn't ever really like the plan, but he gave them what they wanted. And he's like, he's gonna take all your daughters to marriage and send all your sons to war, which is what happened. But he's like, okay, I guess.
Yeah. And that was sort of my reading at the time. At this point, I am just kind of really struck by the fact that is a definite stream, that is a massive seed within the mix, but it's not the only thing, because there is also David, the anointed king, and it seems like I see our brothers in the corner here. Like, I have been paying close attention during like all of your comments in Boost Till Bible Study. But there definitely does seem to be throughout like the books of Judges and Samuel, on the one hand, like a deep ambivalence, potentially anarchistic negativity towards kingship as a concept. But then there is also the endorsement of David. And that is just a massive tension that is just that's sort of like where my mind goes to a lot whenever I think about politics, just because it's such those two things are thrown into your face and they are just supposed to dance with you for your entire life, I think.
Yeah.
So you've got to figure out like what is the difference between like an absolute abhorrence of rule which is give it like the rejection of kings starts in Judges in like 9 and 10 with like Abimelech. But that's in the context of a book whose kind of like concluding sentences, in those days there was no king, said as if that's probably a problem. Like there is an ideal of self-government, self-rule that they couldn't handle.
Right. Well, and that's kind of my broad vision of what's happening in the grand narrative of the Bible and all of that is like, to me, it's like, well, you got a king, and then you got like the Davidic king, and then you got the example of Jesus, who for Christians is a king, but he's a king in a very different way than like a nationalistic king. But then I think there's the Christians who, so then you can go 2 ways with that. As a Christian, you can say Jesus is the king, and then you go like, well, he came lowly the first time, but then he's going to come back and he's going to bring the fucking hammer, you know? Like that's the revelation Jesus. And or where I would
Tattoo Jesus, the UFC fighter. I was there in the Driscoll days.
Yeah. Power King Jesus. It's like ripping phone books. Or you can go the route of like, no one will need anyone to teach them, for God will teach everyone from the inward man. We're like, Christ in me, the whole mystery of Christ is king, but he's king from within. Which is that's where I go. Do we want to get back to your story? I mean, you can riff on that, or we can go back to your timeline.
Yeah. I mean, that's it for well, it gets personalist in ways that I'm not really going to go too deeply into, but Yoder deeply affected me, just because he, in the Politics of Jesus, narrated the story of Jesus that added layers and development and seriousness to Jesus's calling that I had not given to Jesus before. So he took Jesus very, 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 very seriously. He took following Jesus very, very seriously. He, was adamant that this should cost you something, and so that convicted me. It made me feel like, okay, I'm not paying enough attention. And he had a lot of talk about, and it's just kind of like puzzling about this idea and making very seriously the fact that actually this is probably more a Hauerwas point. Jesus tells you to love your enemies, which presumes you are living in such a way that generates enemies.
Right.
And that puzzled me for a little while, as I'm like, that on one hand, like that doesn't make any sense. We're cool and chill and peaceful people, and we're looking for the betterment of the world. Who could have a problem with that?
Right. And in as much as it depends on you, live at peace with all men.
Yeah.
But blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely for my name's sake. Yeah, that's because I can often feel that way because that's something I've been thinking about. I don't understand why. I mean, I do on one hand, but like I incite very strong reactions from people. And then, so you can go like 2 ways with either positively or negatively. You can go 2 ways with that of like, which is kind of this was a big thing in emergent culture and even big evangelicalism too, is like, well, that's the speaking truth to power, like I'm being a prophet. So like I'm saying the thing, and Hezi said that in here, like, anarchists are the prophets. And you can use that as an excuse to be a smug, self-righteous asshole, I suppose, on one hand. But then there is the other hand too of like Jesus, if you are supposed to follow Jesus, like you're gonna piss people off. You are. That's not like I don't think that's a green light to just try to piss people off, but like you're gonna. So I don't know where that is, because that's a lot of that. Like even talking about anarchism, God, that pisses people off. No subject that I've ever spoken about, probably, of all my controversial opinions, whether it's like hell gets close. Like talking about universalism and hell and nonviolence.
Hell and peace, man.
Man, it makes people mad. Good Lord.
Yeah. And I think both of those, the only way you can really talk about either one of those is to just get like insanely personalist. Those are 2 topics that deeply involve the person, deeply involve the story. I mean, frankly, like like part of the reasons I've never really seriously jumped into like a hell versus universalism debate is because it's just like we have to do it in person. We have to do it in person because it's not like for me it's not a debate. It's just more I've got to tell you a story of like where I am coming from, what it is that's inside of me, what I have been through that makes hell so believable for me.
Right, because it's
Again,
not.
I do not want to bring up this topic other than just to illustrate that it's
Right.
deeply personalist and digital mediums, text mediums frustrate it incredibly quickly.
Yeah, it's really hard. Yeah, I agree with you because it's and that probably also speaks to where like we are not this like enlightenment urban monoculture rationalist thing. You can't just have the abstract conversation divorced from grandpa or this event that happened in your life or this big trauma that you went through. Like that's your understanding of justice is connected to all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, no, the other thing that happened in my story is just that while this all was happening was near the tail end of George W. Bush's reign. So it was the hot topic. There was like in like theological circles, in academic circles, like Hauerwas was a known quantity. He was talked about a lot. Another thing that was talked about, and T. picks this up, is the the whole like Jesus is Lord, Caesar is not. There was a lot of anti-imperialist, anti-Roman theology that was being written. I think like Richard Horsley and guys like that who were making a lot about the fact that Jesus's claim to be Messiah and Son of God is directly antagonistic to Roman emperor cult stuff. And so that was in the air. And so Hauerwas and Yoder were kind of my gateway into it. And I basically spent my entire seminary reading a bunch of Mennonites, reading a bunch of guys, trying to turn this thing over in my mind. Because I was also trying to be sensitive to the fact that, especially when you're trying to change your mind, I kind of came to seminary with a question like, how does one change your mind responsibly? And I don't think just a radical shift from one frame to the other, especially a dramatic shift, is especially healthy.
Yeah.
Or actually especially like helpful. So I was trying to learn how to be a non-reactionary thinker and a non-reactionary learner. And also this was just a world where like the outside was it was opaque. So it was hard to get into. So I had to do a lot of reading. So there's this weird space where there's a lot of time where I was compelled to read things that I wasn't understanding very well. And the one great thing about the Mennonites is a lot of their books. I mean, Yoder started it with his like the politics of Jesus, but they are more likely to talk about the politics or the social embodiment of a thing versus it at the idea level. So the biggest thing that they're concerned about is the ideas that we have in our heads need to be socially embodied. So they're trying to make sure these things are not abstract.
Right. Well, and that's like whether or not that's the luxury belief thing, right? Where and there's some degree to where you can't. I mean, part of that for me is the like two verses that I've been meditating on, ruminating on, chewing the cud of for a very long time are make friends by unjust wealth and being in the world but not of the world. And to me, that's a lot of the luxury beliefs. Because I think of somebody like what you're talking about. They, in as much as I can, navigating all the relationships in my life and my wife and my kids and everything else, they're not really luxury beliefs for me. And I'm not advocating for like I don't think that everybody, because that's the hard shift, like not everybody can just start moving out of the city and homesteading or like doing their own local homesteading stuff. That's too much of a radical shift. That's the kind of, I'm not that kind of anarchist where I'm just like, Mr. Robot or like Fight Club where we're just like blow up the corporate buildings. I don't think that's a positive way forward, but but you do have to make those decisions somewhat. I was thinking of Shane Claiborne as you were talking about this, because like he's one of those people who puts his money where his mouth is. Like he lives in a voluntary kind of commune, holding things together community. Julian, and he's Mennonite, in our little corner. Like they do that. They don't, and I'm sure there's technical whatever things with it, but they don't own anything,
Fight Club is just what happens if you don't jubilee if every 50 years or so.
Maybe inevitably, yeah.
I think,
or it just collapses on its own eventually.
And I will say, Grim, like Yoder's reading of Jesus is like the core of Jesus's mission, as Yoder kind of narrated it, is directly tied into economic jubilee. Like when he stands up in the synagogue in Nazareth and preaches liberty to the captives, he is invoking jubilee passages, and basically like the core of his ministry is we are not forgiving debts, and this thing is piling up.
Yeah. What do you think about this? Joseph said Jesus wasn't an anarchist. He wanted to disrupt one kingdom and establish another.
Yeah, no, like I completely like don't disagree with that at all. I think for the most part, the Christian anarchist position is if Jesus is the king, then nobody else has the right to claim a subsidiary kingship. Now, the others will say, like, no, this endorses different kingships under the lordship of Christ. And there is even like, I mean, Revelation ends with the gates are never going to be shut and the kings of the earth enter in and bring their treasures in and out and stuff like that. So yeah, like there are a lot of, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of kind of like girdle, internally coherent accounts of Christian politics.
Right. Well, and if all kings were Jesus like kings, I wouldn't have anything to say about them. I'd be like, good, God bless you. You are serving the whole of the body and not lording it over everyone else. Fantastic. Then you're a great king. God bless you. I don't have any problem with that then. The problem is the kings don't live that way. or presidents or whatever,
Yeah, no, that is the nice thing about like the Christian theology of the kingship of Christ is now you have a standard by which all other kings can be judged. And in cultures where the culture is predominantly Christian, you would hope that the king does feel that sting somehow. But again, you have like the problem you always have with kings. I mean, you see it in David, where there's nobody who is above the king who can call the king to account and say, like when Nathan confronted David with his sin, if David didn't want to hear it, you wouldn't hear from Nathan anymore.
Yeah. Sorry, oh man, we got Claire in here now.
Yeah. I mean, good to see you, Claire. I don't see you on my normal streams anymore because you were so rude to me. You got the block.
Oh no.
Yeah,
you brought down the kingly hammer?
I did. I also don't believe in consistency and or recognize that
you got to break.
Like we're all in process. And all I'm here to talk about is that I have been influenced by anarchism. I'm not necessarily an anarchist. I told you early on, I don't identify as just about anything.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, like I understand the draw. This is a conversation I've had with Rod Hare a few times of he doesn't often like labels because of it's probably related to the who you are, what you are thing. And it's also like a reaction to forms of identitarianism and intersectionality, because any one label doesn't encapsulate, like a label isn't a monolith, right? There's huge variability within any label, like pick a label. Like, what is a Christian? I don't know. It's complicated. What is an American? Well, it's complicated. You can't it is defining something, but there's a lot of expression within that label. And so I'm somewhat of the mind though, where like, I know all those dangers, but I'll still adopt labels. I just will
Mhm.
put that caveat in there of like
Yeah.
the label. That's part of the iconic thinking thing. The label is
Mhm.
an icon. It's not a,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean I'm not anti-naming, essentially. Like I will call
Right.
myself a Christian. I will call myself
Mhm.
an anarchist, but then you get into all the debates of what do you mean by that?
Right.
And all the
Right. Well,
people who get mad.
I mean, this is the big thing that I learned from Hauerwas is that like part of identification is also a submission to judgment. And so he said like, well, the famous quote from Hauerwas is I call myself a Christian or a Christian pacifist because I am a violent son of a bitch.
Mm,
I have bound myself to a humble, peaceable body because I need it. I need them to keep me accountable because left to my own devices, I will act out. So I'm
yeah,
joining this community and submitting to their moral formation because I need help. I
right.
need saving.
It's like this is what Jason Almontree always says. It's a ring. It's a
Mhm.
closure. Like that's what that is. It closes you in. It binds you, like quite physically, literally. And that's what a name is too, somewhat.
Mhm.
Um, so
Yeah, and so that was the thing that brought me into this is basically like Hauerwas and Yoder were telling me like if you're going to adopt this label, it should be more like I felt the pull that it should be more binding on me than than I thought it was just growing up. Like it's more demanding of me than I realized, and they
yeah,
drew me and they did a great Yoder in particular just kept drawing me to scripture and being like, see, it's right there, it's right there, it's right there. And then you start to realize that it is um, that's also my first experience of the fact that was it communities bind and blind, labels bind and blind,
hmm,
where the fact that because I came from my like big Eva kind of like like Christian heritage, and they had trained me to look and approach and understand the Bible as whole in a particular way,
hmm,
and you just don't notice certain things until they're pointed out to you by somebody who is not of your tribe and says, you missed this, you missed this, you missed this. And you have
right,
to reckon with the fact that like, how am I not able to see this? And they drew this giant path from Genesis to Revelation that says like, no, we're reading the same book.
right. No, and that's kind of it's very related to this. Is like true anarchism can't be labeled. Well, that's kind of what we were talking about. It's the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao, but yet you have to. Or it's why I say, God is he about whom we must never speak, when we must always keep speaking. You
Mhm.
always veiling and unveiling, revelation. That's
Mhm.
just the nature of reality.
Yeah.
Or like that's another thing OG or Daniel said in your conversation where he said, which is basically a Rob Bellism, is like once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you taste, you cannot untaste. It's just like you think you know something, and then you have an experience, an event, a taste or something, and then it's like the whole everything shifts. You can have those moments where you see everything differently. So like, but I don't know. Like, I mean, this is what I was saying is like they are cheap. I would say
Mhm.
if this is why I talk about iconic knowing so much.
Well,
Labels
not so
are
much.
deceptive and
Mhm.
until you see them as portals and that they're not monoliths. Because what are
Mhm.
you going to say? We're not going to name things? That's
Yeah.
stupid.
So I think and this gets into some of what I was talking about Daniel with is part of it is labels that aren't integrated into the rest of your life. And so I had a label that wasn't like according to like Hauerwas and Yoder's judgment. I had not fully integrated into my life. My life was not like embodying everything that
Mhm.
they said the Christian label should entail. And so this is probably the biggest kind of like core takeaway, particularly from my interaction with Hauerwas, is just it's had a deep effect on how I like attempt to speak, which is why I started off saying like I'm less interested in identity than like ontology, like what you are versus who you are.
Yeah.
Because like naming is really, really easy. Being is much, much harder. So being is the thing you need to focus on.
Right.
And you should not, and I think you should be kind of like slow to label, um, and quick to understand, which means paying attention to who you actually are. And there comes a time when you need to like just push all your chips in and join a big community that is going to hold you morally accountable. But that's also not a thing you should do lightly.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, that's I'm trying to remember who was. Oh, David Busatil, I think, was saying that to me in our conversation, where he was saying, because that's the problem with the labels, and because it's the veiling and unveiling thing, is they can deceive you. Where he said, like, there's some people who disconnect. You know, he was saying, like, he had a conversation with a friend or something who is a liar, essentially, who lies a lot, and the guy was just like, "Well, I'm not a liar," and he's like, "But do you lie all the time?" And he's like, "Well, then you're a liar." Like that's what a liar is. He's like someone who lies all the time. You're like, "Well, I don't identify with that label." But do you do it all the time? Because then you're a liar, you know. And it made me think
there's
of
some.
Go ahead.
I can say that this draws back to the topic of shame we brought up a little bit earlier, is the fact that one of the reasons that the West's guilt innocence culture is so averse to shame language, because they will say you are what you do. One of the great things that kind of like a guilt innocent subjectivity does is that it allows you to not identify with your actions.
So it's a strength, but a damnation.
It is a strength, in that, and also because we don't identify people with their actions, they are not bound to them in a way that, like, because I lied once or had there's a period of time where I was lying a lot, it's like you'll always be a liar. That's not true. So guilt innocence, I think, anticipates the idea that you can change. But in part because the locus of moral condemnation is internal rather than external. But in a culture that's more governed by shame, it is the externals that govern your behavior. And so it is the labels. And so they're more likely to say you are a liar because you consistently lie.
Yeah.
That's something that that whole, like, somebody who lies all the time and doesn't consider themselves a liar.
Yeah.
That's a uniquely guilt sort of situation. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's one of the strengths of each of those types of cultures. You know, they both have strengths, but I do think, to the point that you just made a little bit, that because it's my opinion somewhat that the vanguard of consciousness is in the West, and what you just said is one of those reasons, is because it gives you a sense of agency in transformation, because you can, there's something you can do about that. Like, okay, maybe I am a liar. Maybe that's the benefit of the shame guilt culture, is like, okay, yeah, I am a liar, but also, like, I also am not a liar, because I can have that subjective separation from it and strive to be something else and repent and change,
Yeah.
What is this? Where the Romans popped you so the naked kid at 4 a.m. and he screamed that. That's right.
I think we can just pass that one by.
I don't even know what that means.
I know exactly what he's talking about, but that's a whole different story. We'd have to get a little bit Pajovian and talk about Adam in the garden, and is there any connection between the naked man and the fully clothed man at the tomb and how he's described in Mark? It's like,
this is why I need Foxman to talk about internet hygiene or whatever we're doing.
Roll the olives, man.
I just don't. See, Brett, this is interesting. I mean, we don't need to go on a big side. I just don't think that is God accepting. I do. See, that is the thing. I do think God is that accepting. So, all right, let's do. Do you want to open this up at all to see if people come in or not?
I'm not against it.
Okay, because if we're going to do that, and because I don't want to go super long, let's do it. I will put the link out.
Yeah, let's go for it. Is Rigel streaming today? Do you know? He was out last week.
I don't know. Let me see. Yeah. I don't think I haven't gotten a notification for it, but if he is, he'd be starting in like a half hour. So
yeah. I will say it seems pretty clear. Claire does not intend to speak nicely to us, so I have no interest in talking to her.
Yeah, that's fair. We don't have to do that. See, this is something I've been learning from all you guys a little bit. Like lately, I've realized I don't have to play every game. You know, there are certain people who want to play certain games and they come at me in the same way every time, and I'm like, I don't want to do that, and I don't have to do that. And now what I'm working on is not feeling guilty about not playing everyone's game all the time.
See, this is.
She needs to tell
And
you.
again, it's not lost on the rest of us who roll our olives off the plate that there are certain virtues that happen here that don't happen anywhere else, and that's because of the openness that you embody. We're just
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. It's there are strengths for even doing that. I think there's strengths for not doing it every time. Like even this, I like having individual conversations with people. I like having a wide thing where just anybody can come in and play. Someone can come in and play, but even something I've realized even recently. I mean, people can come in and talk about anarchism if they want to or whatever, but I don't. I mean, I've known this about myself, but even in like TLC, there's a kind of opponent processing that I'm game for. I've realized it's okay to just like the things that you like, Like there's certain kinds of debates that I don't want to do. Even if people, there are friends that I have in the TLC who want to debate me in a certain way, and I've just decided I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
No. Yeah, like at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about ska. Matt C had me pegged. Like it was it was my years of being a ska fan that toughened my skin for you nonsense. Like, yeah, I like what I like, and it's not my fault you guys don't like fun.
So Claire is back screen, and I could let her on and then just boot her immediately if she's rude, but would you prefer not? You want me to make the call? I'll let you on. Here's the thing.
I like she has signaled very clearly her thoughts on us, her thoughts on this discussion.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, Claire. I guess if you want to be able to come on stream and play nice, don't be like this kind of thing. Like if you just repeatedly say that we're all just like weak husbands of women who tell us what to do all the time, and that we're verbally diarrheaing and not saying anything of value, why would I let you on screen? Because you're not playing nice. So, yeah. What up, Yosef?
Hey guys.
Morning.
I'm good. How you guys?
Well, I have a cold, which I'm not
sorry.
very happy about. I was going to go to a Lyceum event about media, like right up my alley.
That's cool.
And I had to bail at the last minute because I was probably like peak transmission of whatever this is.
No, I get it. I've been home for however many weeks now.
I didn't know that. You've been homesick?
Yeah, I've been homesick since February. I don't even remember, like a month ago. I had COVID twice in the past month, plus I have some other like virus, and it's just so that's why I have so much time to chat these days. Silver lining. This is great. I mean, I haven't heard a lot of your backstory, and I didn't even know you had a channel, Matt. Like, I now need to go back and like look at those 3 exclusive videos. I've never heard of that.
Like, it is 90% seal videos. I kid you not.
Are they playing with balloons?
No. That's my professional life. That's not for the TLC.
You don't mix seals and balloons. I see.
Actually, it is kind of magical because I walked out of a movie theater and found a mother seal giving birth on the shore. And so if you go onto my channel, you can see a baby seal swim for the first time. It's incredible.
That's very cool. Very cool. I know nothing about ska. I didn't come on for the ska. I'm sorry. I guess it's just not my world. Punk. None of this. My musical world was very, very different growing up. But I was interested in the kingship and anarchism conversation.
Yeah, tell us.
So I put a couple comments in there, but it's fascinating because, and I mean, it was funny because I think Felipe's had a comment like, once you start down this like path of I can't remember if he said pacifism or anarchism, like you lose the Trinity real fast, and I'm like, okay, and because in some ways, right. And I've had these conversations with Julian, a little bit with Jedediah, right, who's very into Jubilee stuff. like there is a real and serious conversation to be had about, on the one hand, these approaches and texts that I've never read Yoder or Hauerwas, but like from they're being filtered down into the parts people in TLC who've kind of filtered them. It seems that like there's, on the one hand, like there's no king but God. Not looking for, like there's no kingship, and like in some sense, like you can say whether that Jesus, because Jesus is God, like he is the only king. That's saying the same language as far as I'm concerned for Trinitarians, right? Like I can accept that. I don't need to like get hung up on that. And therefore, like, what's that look like though for governance in the real world, for dealing with actual people who need to be organized in some sense, not necessarily like strictly, not hierarchically. Doesn't need to be like a monarchy, but like there, you do have to deal with real things. And in some sense, you said that like Yoder is going to concentrate on like, how do you bring these things into the world and actually like set up a community that has these principles? And like, you know, he's going to draw from Jubilees or whatever. He's, or not the book of Jubilees, but the Jubilee concept. Right. And like, they do need to still figure out the political question, even as they push off monarchy, right? Or like a kingship model. And like, it doesn't excuse them from dealing with politics. In fact, I'd say in some sense, they're more serious about politics precisely because they can't divorce it. Right. So, and this is, you know, in some ways, maybe
it is a lot harder to do politics when you don't believe in coercion.
Yeah.
You are playing on hard mode.
Absolutely. And they take that challenge and they don't just dismiss it. And I think we can see Christian nationalism as in some sense, they're realizing that this was lacking in other parts of Christianity, maybe because of the historical path that it took. And they're not going to go about politics the way the Anabaptists are. I mean, I have no like illusion that's going to happen, but like, I think that they're at least aware of the same lack, right? That for like the sacred social order to actually be thick, like you do need a political component. You can't just, you know, say it's above, you know, render unto Caesar's, or oh, it's his. It's just kind of interesting because of how then that has to be dealt with, right? Or reinterpreted or thought about, because there is a difference between Deuteronomy or Leviticus and Jubilee and sabbatical, and you know, you don't have a king like other nations, and dealing with that question when you're independent and autonomous is a very different question than when you're under an empire. And you know, and it has to fundamentally be, and this is part of why Ezekiel, like I said this in the comment, I don't know if you could see the comments though. So Ezekiel, he will not call the future Messiah a king. He refuses to. He calls him in the sea a prince or a tribal leader. Like it's a much lesser title, and it's very deliberate because he uses king to describe the kings of the empires that he's critiquing. He's very aware, but he won't use that word for the future Jewish king because he's not going to be a king. He's going to be under the king who's God, and he should not think of himself as a king, even though he has all these special privileges. Ezekiel says like he's going to get like a 13th tribal portion of land and be able to give it out as gifts in these like certain ways. Like he elevates the status of a leader in many ways. At the same time, he's like saying, but be careful, I'm not going to let you think of yourself as a king, and you're going to be bound by all these extra rules, sort of like a constitutional monarchy. Like, and you're going, and Ezekiel's of course working under a model where the empire, Babylonian and then Persian, right? There's a king of kings. And that's a literal thing. It's not just like the king of kings does not mean greatest king. It means I'm the king over all the other kings, and there's kings under me. And for him, like that king of kings is God. Like he's taken this metaphor and he's applied it and said, God is obviously the king of kings, and he does direct other kings, but like we should not think of ourselves as having a king because that's too much. Like even that's dangerous. Sorry, I talked a long time.
Yeah. Like my first immediate thought is that there's an interesting correlation in the Gospel of John when Jesus is talking to Pilate, and he makes the phrase that Christian anarchists love, where he says, "My kingdom is not of this earth," sort of like making the distinction, like if my kingdom were a kingdom like all of the other nations on the earth, my soldiers would be here fighting on my behalf. And so, like there is this recognition that there is a different sort of like political rulership that he's trying to embody than we're used to seeing.
But when I hear that, I translate it to Hebrew automatically, because this earth is Olam Hazeh. So it's like it.
Oh.
And a verse Olam Haba, right? Like so instead of, because of multiple translation issues, right? But like we have earth and world are the same, and but also age. The way that the Greek translated the word earth into age. It's you can read that as this age is, my kingdom is not of this age, which is closer, I guess, to the Jewish reading, which is like my world is not, this kingdom is not olam hazeh in this world, in this age, in this world, but it's the coming one, olam haba. So to me, like I translate John into totally and I don't know that
John does love those like this age, the next age talk.
Right.
As well.
It is so John, right? And I assume he like even if he's only really fluent in Greek and not Hebrew, and I'm not sure with John, like it's too ubiquitous of a concept for him not to know for this time period. Like, so when he says this earth, I think it does sort of, the translation sort of hides this kind of whole Jewish subtext.
Let me throw another one at you. I'm curious your thoughts. That also kind of like applies to sort of like the anarchist concept. It's from Matthew, the Beatitudes, where traditionally it's translated like, was it "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." And I'm guessing you again like translate it, like you can much more concretely translate it. "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land." And I really see him as like having like very specifically the image of Abraham there, as Abraham was the one who did not seize the land, but was willing to patiently wait, and his descendants received the land.
That's interesting, because I see the text as critiquing Abraham a little bit on that. The text of Genesis critiquing that he, with the 9 kings, the war, and he helps them, and then he doesn't try, right? Like he deals with Melchizedek, and they do their thing, but like not once do they attribute this victory to God publicly to the other kings. Not once do they like try to bring them in. Like it's just like, you're the kings of this world, and I'm not going to like touch. Now it's interesting. The meek is coming from this word. He's paraphrasing a line. I think it's in Psalms. I've looked into this before because I have a lot of thoughts on the Beatitudes. But it's really like it's a form of humility, but it's specifically the word that's used to describe Moses. It's not used to describe Abraham. So there is something.
Okay, right.
But it's funny because what is Abraham? Abraham doesn't inherit. What is Moses? Moses doesn't get go into the land, even though he inherits the land, doesn't get to go into it. So there is something funky there, perhaps, going on.
That is interesting.
But no, I'm not. I mean, yeah, Luke, you have some thoughts here. You're just dealing with the comment.
I'm doing exegetical research.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
While you guys talk. So, I mean, I just typed that into to the Goog, and they gave this AI output because they said in the group or Hive Mind, Psalm 37.
I can't read it.
So it says, "The meek shall inherit the earth and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace." Psalm 37:11. So I don't know what that. I mean, obviously this is the English. What is the Hebrew of Psalm 37:11?
Pull it up. My Bible's downstairs, but I'll put it up on the computer. I know. I usually have it always with me. Which verse is it in 37?
11.
Okay. Oh shoot! But I also have to deal with the different numberings of Psalm.
Yeah.
But I hate that. It's the most annoying thing. As I assume at 11. Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Man,
that's the right.
It's so frustrating how there's just the whole Bible is so like interconnected that I'm like, oh, I've never realized. I'm just looking through this whole psalm is very Beatitude-esque.
Oh, totally. I mean,
like it's very Sermon on the Mount-y.
It's all about this list of inheriting the land, right?
It's like the New Testament was very
I mean, it starts with do not fret, which ties into his like don't be anxious.
Matt, you think we're not staying on topic?
I mean,
the gentle will inherit the earth. I mean, that seems kind of on topic with our kind of nonviolent Hauerwasian, Yoder, pacifism, anarchism.
It's interesting.
Besides, we open the floodgates, so it can go wherever we want now. But sorry, go ahead.
Where's the full verse of 37:11? How does your translation deal with the end of that verse?
In the abundance of peace, then shall delight themselves in the abundance.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Interesting.
I will say to Phlebas, who says pacifism breaks the Trinity, we'll need to have a longer conversation about this, but it is true that generally from my reading, the Mennonites have a much lower Christology. They are much more likely to emphasize like the human like works of Jesus, and some of them will kind of like downplay the more ecstatic claims. So and that's partly because of their focus on embodying and obeying his specific commands.
Well, and PVK, I want to hear what you have to say, but one quick thing about that whole verse of Psalm 11, in gentleness, and then you'll have the abundance of peace. And before, one of the comments you made, Skank, was you were saying playing politics without coercion is playing on hard mode. But you could also, I like to see all these things fractally, because I think it's the same thing. So even in family, without, and this isn't an argument for like not necessarily corporeal punishment on your kids when they're young, because I think that's a different thing. But like now, like when my son is 18, if he's not obeying me because he's not scared of me being violent against him, like that's not authority, that's power, and true authority isn't violent. True authority involves submission to its proper authority. That's not the nonviolence I'm talking about. Anyhow, PVK.
Well, when you read the Sermon on the Mount Beatitudes, you have to read them in context of the Psalm and Proverbs Beatitudes, because the psalmist Beatitudes are all common religion oriented. They are the natural expectation. They're sowing and reaping. If you do good things will happen. If you are devoted to God, your life will go well. And
Deuteronomy worldview.
Yeah. And I think it's a very similar dynamic, as you were saying, Skank, about there's this tension always with kingship, that the king is an essential piece. I mean, you cannot read Samuel and Kings and Chronicles without this incredible focus on the kings. I mean, the whole lens is practically there. I was just reading through the miracles of Elisha last night with my men's group, and just noting for them how different Elisha is, even from Elijah. And Elijah is always wrangling with the monarchies, whereas Elisha does some of that initially with the battle in Jehoram and Jehoshaphat, but then he's much more of this wonder worker, helping out widows. And
so I'm gonna just totally disagree with you here, because every miracle in Elisha is also done by Elijah. They all have parallels.
Yes.
They both have widows. They both have kids. There's no more wonder working in one than the other. There's no more and they have equal amount of politics. In fact, Elisha's more involved in politics. He's just involved more in international politics, and Elisha's more involved. Elisha's involved in international, and Elijah's involved in domestic.
But show me Elisha is clearly working in a different frame, and the relationship with monarchy with Elisha is different too. The kings fear Elisha, and Elijah runs for cover. It's an interesting contrast between the two. But to get back to my main point,
Elisha runs for cover also. But yeah,
there's a dis-ease with monarchy and the standard template of it. And so there's all this nuance that runs through. And I think part of what happens with Jesus is a lot of that gets pulled out. And part of it is just that Jesus is in a very different context than the autonomous kingdoms of Israel and Judah. Jesus is living in a vassal, a vassal condition. And so, but again, back to the Beatitudes, Jesus' Beatitudes, if you were to, because I've done this, So take all the Beatitudes out of the Psalms just as a form, and then put the Sermon on the Mount next to it. It's really interesting because they just sort of pop. It doesn't, and this is so typical of Jesus later in the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard it said, but I tell you, he's not sort of kicking over authority, but he's certainly playing with it.
So I don't see a difference between Psalm 37 and Jesus on the beginning of the Beatitude, like on the blessing part, right? The beginning of the sermon. Because the Psalm 37 says you need to let go of anger and insult and, and the same thing that Jesus is going to say at the very end of the Beatitudes, but it starts here in Psalm 37:8, right? You give up anger and abandon fury, do not be vexed. It will only do ra, like bad, harm. And those who do harm are cut off. So to me, it's the same exact message, and I don't think there's a difference here in Psalm 37 and the Beatitudes, honestly, at all. I think he's telling them the same message as the Psalm.
I want to draw a connection to Kale and Steve Skojak's conversation recently, where the difference between, say, like Deuteronomy, Psalm, Beatitudes versus Sermon on the Mount. In Deuteronomy, like that's assuming you're in the land, you've established the kingdom. That's a time where Israel they are free to set up their own Skinner box for society. And that's instructions for how to do one that comports with natural law as it has been revealed to them by God.
Not natural.
Jesus
Not
is telling. Yeah, well, I know. But you would think that Israel is giving commandments that allow them to live in harmony with God's creation. All right, I know, like two slightly different things, mixing categories here. Jesus, on the other hand, is giving them instructions for how to get by in a hostile Skinner box they are not allowed to construct.
So, but the thing is, Deuteronomy isn't the first time the commandments were given, right? So, like, that's the covenant of Moab, of the plains of Moab is Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is retelling the covenant of Sinai, which is about how to do this in a hostile environment, right? So you do have both sides of that already in Tanakh. Not just in Tanakh, you have both sides in Torah already. And that's why there's actually a really interesting shift. And this is where a lot of the theories around documentary hypothesis have come in, because they're like, well, why did the laws change Deuteronomy versus Leviticus? The other explanation that's not documentary hypothesis is because those are the laws for the land and these are the laws for the wilderness. And it's pretty explicit about that. If you look in Deuteronomy, it says, like, when you enter the land, this is what you're going to do. And in Exodus, it said, and this is what you do for your camp. When you're in the camp, in the wilderness, and there's dangers. And the laws there are not going to be the same as the ones in the land. They're similar. They have the same spirits of the law. They try to get the same values out. But there's a fundamental difference in how you live in a wilderness and how you live in the land of Israel. And not only that, but the land of Israel has unique properties, according to Deuteronomy, that don't apply to other lands. So it's not that you can just use this to live anywhere in the world, but specifically for this land, this is how you need to live. And that's another really important aspect of that.
In the context, so Yosef, in the context of living in the divided kingdom, who is supposed to update the law? The king?
No, definitely not. The king has no power to update the law. It's supposed to be some sort of combination of elders, teachers, and priests. I mean, that's the elders in your gate, right? The elders in your gate are, and it's always plural. It's never singular, right? So it's not a king. The king might be among the elders, but he's never a sole authority. And in fact, the king is bound, right? He has to have a copy of the Torah with him all the time. He has to read it all the time, right? Like, he is super bound by, in a constitutional monarchy sense, by the law. This is where they got the concept in constitutional monarchy of having to bind the king to the law, and the king cannot be above it, and the king cannot write it. Is because this is the basis of that entire thought process in English.
But we don't have later Deuteronomies.
What do you mean?
I mean, you have the law given in Moab. You don't have the law given in Jerusalem. You don't have the law given in Samaria.
We believe
the Latin for Thirderonomy.
What do you think the oral Torah is? The oral Torah is the generational updating of the law.
All right, you guys. Alan, what do you have to say? I mean, you're not, tell a joke, clown. Go.
Yeah, well, at least the clown is bound to the banana peel. So, you got to jump in and slip on the banana peel, and, you cannot update the banana peel.
Great question from Claire, one of Claire's followers, by the way. Great question, Gandalf. I'm no shit. Why, if we are all losers, why? Why are you here? All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alan.
No, I just that's one of the drums I like to bang on is and honestly it's somewhat related to that like quote you just put up on screen of like people think I'll start with Luke's point about your kid and like eventually you just really don't have any power. And people like to think they have any power, but it's really parents of kids or people who have relationships with people who are like drug addicts, gambling addicts. Addict is just a word for something that can't be controlled really. So when you actually have a relationship with someone who can't control parts of themselves or don't want to control parts of themselves, you really realize how little power you have. And I think we think of when we map these things on, we just say like, this is dumb, so everyone should stop doing it. Like it's very easy to be like, oh, I think Formula One is stupid. It's so dumb. It's the dumbest thing ever. Go to a Formula One bar and then start saying stuff like that. You know, it's like go to, no one, suddenly you go from like, oh, well, here's a pithy thing to say at the water cooler of like, they should just have it be one lap so the whole race can be 30 seconds. And then go to a Formula One bar and be like, everyone's going to be like, that's weird. You're a weird guy. Don't say that anymore. And you're either going to leave or you're going to be like, actually, it's kind of cool. Actually, I kind of enjoy I really like this element. So it's like, my point is that the circumstance you're in and the type of relationship you have really make you see, like, we update so quickly on those narratives of like, oh, it's dumb and I'd never do it to it's the coolest thing ever. You see, you see this everywhere all the time, kids who are like, I would never go to a high school football game, and then they go to a college that's a really big D1 college football thing, and then they're like, I love it, it's the best thing ever. So the point just being of like our relationship, like the individual, I guess, is the point. The person, I'm sure this happens at different levels, but just being very clear about like when we participate in something, realizing what position we're in and what levers we can pull on, because honestly, like most of the time it's like we have almost no or very little power over something, and just like embarrassing someone else or being like this is stupid is a lever we try and pull on to be dismiss something, but we realize like that lever only works in very specific circumstances, and only works when you're kind of already agreeing with power. To make it a good example, and then I'll stop talking, is when you're in a place where no one cares about Formula One, it's easy to dog on it. When you go to the Formula One bar and everyone's watching it, you say that same thing, and suddenly you feel like you're an idiot, and suddenly you start changing your tune, people don't really even realize that they just completely did a 180 on their own beliefs so that they could align with what was the power structure. But that only comes out of like convenience or a desire to align with the power structure.
Yeah. Also, try going to a pacifist bar and saying pacifism is stupid. Get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
Well, they are the fighting Quakers, Luke, right? That's the team. They're the fighting Quakers. They will do it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, Alan, that you said that, because I was feeling that a little bit. It's hard in this conversation, or just in general for me in the TLC, right? Because like I feel like I can say things here, but then like Free William will be like Christ is King or whatever in the comments, and it's like I don't know sometimes if I'm at the Christian bar or if I'm at the water cooler, like and where that line is. And but of course I'm like a really stubborn, whatever, and I'm gonna say, I'm gonna talk smack at the Formula One bar still, so like, and I whatever, like I am just that way, but I hear you. Like I've been sort of feeling that. I mean, I don't know what your comments were in relation to, like if they're in relation to Claire. Like there's so many things that could be in relation to in this conversation. I'm not 100% sure where they land, but I was feeling that for sure.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I'll like respond to that is like, it's always in flux. It's always who's in power is in flux. How open is this versus how closed is this, and like, if you think, and that's the flaw with people saying like, this is the space that you have good conversations at. It's like, no, well, if you want to talk about certain things and you have certain perspectives, like there's a reason why people, the people who show up here show up. No, I think like, yeah, that fluxes definitely, and you see it on like, you're right on the edge of like, you know, you're not Christian, you're like, you know, like, but I think like at our best, we are able to flex out, and like it is more fun when you have more perspectives. But there's still like, you can't just have someone who's like, I'm an ultra atheist and I'm just gonna like Richard Dawkins pwn you every second. It's like theoretically that person wants to talk about religion, but it's not in a way that anybody here would want to really participate in for extended periods of time. So yeah, like there's always which you know, which king are you kneeling to? Which spirit are you under?
What happened? What's going on?
Got a lullaby.
Oh, we have another
Clown stepped on
Womboy.
the banana peel and we stand in awe.
We have 2 Womboys. There we
Who's
go.
the real one?
We can't hear you though.
Sorry,
Oh,
can you
there
hear me
we
now?
Yeah.
Okay. I missed the last thing that was said because I got like kicked out for some reason. Was someone talking or can I say something?
You may
you can-
speak.
Okay.
Thank you for asking permission.
I was just well, I kind of came in because of the Formula One thing, because that was a good analogy, but also I watch Formula One, and I'm at the Formula One bar because I used to go to the Formula One bar with my dad when I was like 3 years old, and I have like an emotional connection to this thing I did with my dad. It probably has nothing to do with Formula One, and I just felt like there was an emotional component to that, whatever that argument was. I can't really remember. But also, this is going to sound so, okay, take this with a grain of salt. But when you were talking about like whether to let Claire in or not, and I'm so bored of talking about Claire, but and then like boundaries and what is the point where it's just taking up a lot of time and energy to, I don't know, I feel like there's a line between acceptance and like, I'm not sure what opponent processing actually means, but maybe this is what I mean. Like, where is the line between that being accommodating and hospitable and then actually detracting from the mission by spending so much energy negotiating with people who are, so this is, I'll just say it, but take it with a grain of salt. I've been trying to understand like demons, and I'm not making any claims. I'm just, I talked to my priest about it because I kept having dreams of these like young men and boys in my dreams who were just annoying, like constantly like throwing things at me and like causing like mayhem for no reason. And I talked to him about it and he was, yeah, that sounds pretty like there are, you know, energies, demons in your dreams and in your life. And I feel like that with trolls more and more. Like this is just a way to distract from the point and like the good work that's trying to be done. And maybe the more useful, constructive way to deal with it would actually be to not deal with it at all, like to just ignore it. I don't know. So but then again, I feel the exact opposite way too. So I'm actually just curious what people think about that.
You got to read President Foxman's piece on olives, Weaponized Apathy. He is so like, he nailed this thing.
Yeah, I need to, I should look it up and plug that. Also, here's a plug. Foxman's like, what was it? There's a title. He shared it with me. It's like his little skinny, sad white boy thing. Look at that cat, Calico Power. But it's really, Foxman Substack is legit.
Actually, he's also got a great stream. It was not long after Chicago that like was a fantastic discussion, like monologue about kind of like biblical ideas about power in politics. Like incredible work.
Yeah.
I'll have to let me see if I can dig up the link here and throw it in there because it does dovetail with this conversation really well, honestly.
I'm trying to, well, anyhow, I'll maybe put it in the description later, but yeah, because I don't, what's the name of his Substack? You got, I don't know off the top of my head.
It should be just President Foxman.
Is it? Okay. Because I don't go on there very much. Oh yeah, it is. And it's, so President Foxman, and then it has, his one is Pale Boy, which is really good. I was listening to that. Weaponized Apathy. Yeah. A drill in the medic warfare. So that's a good one on trolls. I've been, I think Womboy, it's a good question. It's a good point. I'm a lot more comfortable with it. And I think it's just, that's partially why I'm excited to hear Foxman talk about internet hygiene. And Matt's taught me a lot about this too. Because I'm pretty naive that way. Like even in my family, we talk about that all the time. With my wife, will say that. Like I'm kind of like a little puppy who just gets really excited about things. And then people just like hit me with a newspaper, and then I just like get sad and scared, and they're like, "Why do you hit me?" And then I'll go away for a while, and then I come back like a puppy again, and I just forget every time. And there are people who just like, there are people on the internet that I shouldn't try to play with, as my happy little puppy thing, because they don't want to have fun. They just want to be mad all the time, or even sometimes, and I have to balance it even with people that I love and trust who are friends in the TLC, because I'm just like, fucking A, you're just critical all the damn time. No matter what I say, you're going to come after me. And I'm just like, I don't want to do that every day, and I just need to be more comfortable with that. So,
I mean, I just came up in my conversation with, I think it was, no, it wasn't Neil. Oh, Baxter. Seabax. That, like, even if there are people, there's some people, it's not even about that they want to be critical all the time of everything, but like there's just some people who, like, I don't think I could have a productive conversation with, and that's fine. Like, as long as there are other people who can have productive conversations with them, and like maybe we have someone in between us, but like, I said this with respect to Benjamin Boyce. Like, I didn't feel like I could necessarily have a productive conversation with Boyce, because we're just in like totally different frames. And I think that there is sometimes just like too much of a distance, like, to have good conversations sometimes. And it's not even that they have to be wanting to troll you, but like you don't share enough common ground. You can't
right. I think that's also your mic. I think it's your mic. Can you mute yourself? Your mic sucks. Was that? Yeah, now it's better. But yeah, no, I agree. It's like the extreme example is like, if we're speaking different languages, we can't communicate. Like you can't. You can maybe like gesture and do different things. If we are in such a space of untrust, like you're not going to have a positive conversation either, and that's like the balance, I think, of good opponent processing, because somewhat iron sharpens iron, but like, or faithful are the wounds of a friend, but it's just like, I have to believe you're a friend. Like, I actually have to believe you're a friend and you want my good, and you're not like just being egoic and defensive. Is that my mic? What's going on? Oh, now it's better.
Wow. And then you tried to pin it on Yosef. That's crazy, Luke.
And well, he's the only Jew here.
Had to believe the Jew.
Yeah.
I think it's me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing I'd add to that is like, I'm just a big believer in, like, I'm sure it's Foxman probably touches on it a little bit. I know a little bit about the olives and, tactical not care apathy, but it's like, yes, part of the corner is reaching out to new people and new ideas. But I mean, when you go to like any of these in-person events, it's like incredibly deep conversations right off the bat. And it's like, those people are probably the most center of the center. They're not fewer of the periphery people, not saying that they don't serve any function, but show up, and more of the center people. I'm not saying that's the only goal, but there's certainly a lot of value derived at those in-person meetups. It takes minimum over probably $1,000 for the ticket for the week and travel and close to that. So it's like people who give a lot and really care. I think there's a lot of value there, and I think sometimes we sort of pat ourselves on the back too much by being like, we're so open and we're the most open community in anyone, and it's like that's not all that's not some like perfect stamp of like that's only ever good. It's like having closed doors, having meetings with people you specifically want to talk to, having the balance between openness and closeness there's also a value there, which I'll just throw in the hat of like, I really don't mind when people get blocked or banned from streams. I think it's good hygiene. It's there's nothing wrong with that.
Also,
Yeah,
one quick thing, I want to hear what Matt has to say,
Mm.
but it's like, yeah, if you're doing internet hospitality and you want people to come in and share a good meal, and somebody comes in and shits in your living room floor every time, that it's hard to eat a good meal then if they're just constantly dumping on your floor.
And that ruins it for everyone else,
Yeah.
who might have actually been a good participant.
And like the internet is, I think, the more I never had X forever, and then I went on it a couple of months ago to like see what it was all about, and I was just like, wow, this really transforms people's whole psyche. I don't know what it is, but it just I think what you were just saying about the in-person meetings speaks to. There is also something about being online that I think is a factor. Like, these aren't actually the real people necessarily that we're interacting with. They're these, whatever online interaction can potentially do, I think it's actually like way more powerful than we recognize, and can be transformative in a potentially super negative way. So like, I'd love to meet Claire in person and see what Claire was like in person, because I think the internet can be, I wonder.
Yep. All these digital mediums they compress the truth, right? They're all compression algorithms, to convey a particular medium intent. And Twitter's one of them, YouTube's another. The game, I think, and I think this also can play into even a redemptive arc for trolls. To your point, Womboy, is that there's a black hat and a white hat version of all these things, and you can subversively use a anti-human medium like the internet subversively to kind of redemptively bring about something more humane, other than what the medium and the algorithm intended for you to do, including, I think, even being a sad sack in the chat or something. Like, sometimes that's fun. PVK is never more trollish than when he's in the chat, because he understands that there's when you're in the audience, you can throw tomatoes in a way that being on stage, if you threw tomatoes, it would be considered rude. But when you throw a tomato from the stage, you're participating in a way, and you're actually helping to tell the story of what's happening on stage. If you do that on the stream, it's inhospitable. You know what I mean? Like, there's a game going that, to Luke's point, depends on trust. You have to first have a high trust kind of understanding that we're performing, and we all agree that this isn't real, and that the medium is a compression algorithm. So in light of that, let's all pretend to be slightly 10% to the left or the right, off, disjointed from our real selves, in order to reclaim the algorithm for something that's more human-centered. That's my pitch for trolling in the chat.
I think it takes a lot of accurate self-perception to be able to know that you're playing the game. And I think if you don't have that, then you're being played by it, and it can actually just like bring out, again, to demons, which I don't really understand what demons are, but like it can bring things out of people who aren't aware that they're playing the game, that are.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
I think it's just patterns. It's patterns that possess a person repeatedly.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, but there's still to the point that you had before this one, the comment from Fox about Foxman about wanting, even if you're not, no, they don't, even if people aren't self-aware and they don't realize they're part of the game or being played by the game, like there is certainly like this craving for engagement, being wanted to be noticed, being like this like attention. It's not even, it may not even be in some sense like the reason they're seeking attention may not even be like the because they're trying to use it nefariously, but because there's something else going on that is, let's say, a holier use of our attention. In like relative to that, it seems demonic, right? But in some sense, right, like, there is like in a different frame, it's a song crying out for like I'm broken off of like things and I need social interaction, I need attention, I need help. But when that cry occurs and it's occurring expressed in the way that it is against like, oh, we're having this great conversation and dialogue and like this seems like worth paying attention to and there's something, whatever about it. So it's in that contrast that it feels like that thing is trolling. But if we like understood them from a personalist thing, Luke, right? Like we didn't take it relatively to our conversation, and we like, and this is why I actually really love that Claire has been on more streams lately, and I think it's much more. She came onto one of my streams with Klezi, and we like engaged her much more directly. It was awesome. Like, yes, in person would be totally different. I don't know if she's ever gone to the estuary in London, but like, yeah, I think there is something there, even here, even that we can do. Look at David V just had a whole thing about how much he loves Young God on his channel and how he's went from a kind of a troll to like a really interesting participant in the Bible studies. And it was because, he just needed someone to listen to like his crazy ideas, but also like he was willing to sit and listen to the Bible and like with his crazy ideas. And like, yeah, he might bring up, this prophet was on drugs, but okay, like fine, like then we like learn more about Young God's story through that type of insight, right? And like there's a lot to be said there, and I think it's hard. I mean, obviously finding the boundary is hard and setting the boundary is hard. I know that's what you were like struggling with earlier, and the previous streams, like where do you put your boundaries on like listening to the trolls and not listening to the trolls and like giving attention and not. And there might be like a really good argument of like keeping them around and at some point like making a point of directly engaging them so they get the attention, they get the engagement, they actually get listened to, they feel heard, they feel like actually valued as a person and not just a troll. But at the same time, like separating that out, so like that engagement happens, not disrupting a stream, right? So like inviting them on to their own whatever, a round table, one-on-one. So you just have that, and then it kind of can go from there.
Yeah, you help them redirect that energy so that it's not just under pressure and destroying things.
Bum 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 ba da bum 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 ba da bum bum. Chad, under pressure.
What's up?
Oh, robot.
What are you guys talking about?
Trolls
and
demons and Christianity and anarchism. But we got to start doing final words because I'm going to close this down in 2 minutes. So
Robot. Okay.
Chad, go check out Chad's Substack.
Later.
Brilliant stuff in there. Good things. Last quick words. Anarchism, yay or nay? Christ is king, yay or nay?
Okay. Here's a question. If I was to listen to something punk or ska or whatever, what's your top like 3 recommendations?
Kill Lincoln is my absolute favorite band right now. I would say go to Catbite. They're probably the band that they're more like a poppier version, and they're probably the band in the ska scene that's most likely to kind of like really like hit a status rocket soon. They're great, absolutely great. I feel like I could do an older cut here.
Good riddance to good advice.
Solid. That's yeah, and there's always if you want to go back to the late '90s Christian scene, 5 Iron Frenzy is always a winner.
Probably less one for me, but I hear you. I hear you.
Fair,
fair. I did use Celeste listen to Christian a cappella, but
to be fair, I think Five Iron out of all of the 3 bands that I just named is less likely to wave Palestinian flags on stage. The other 2 are contemporary and they're caught up in the punk scene, which is, you know, getting ridden by all sorts of other cultural spirits right now.
Interesting.
Who's more punk, Palestine or Israel?
Man.
All right, Matt, C, Yosef, or Yosef? No, your last word was
What
the
was my
question.
last word?
Matt.
Yeah.
No, I love all you guys. This was an enjoyable stream. Thanks for having me on. How's that for last words?
It was
There was nothing of value that was said in my last.
Personalist knowing, presence,
affection, happiness, joy,
gratitude.
Yeah.
On a good note. Yeah.
Yeah. This little zine.substack.com.
There it is. Plug it. It is good. Also, again, I'm not done. I am 50 minutes into a 1 hour, 20-minute conversation with Daniel, the OG Rose. Steven, you didn't even look at that's always amazing to me too when people just like click on the video and they're like, what's the topic? And I'm like, it's just like isn't it in the title? Although we did kind of go everywhere.
Yeah, with your videos, you can never trust the title to be the topic. I mean,
I always try to Grimm has influenced me. I always try to fulfill on the title to some degree. Listen, when I talk about anything, I'm talking about everything. All right. Yeah, this was good. Thanks, Skank. I'm glad we made it happen. I'm glad that my cold wasn't so bad I couldn't talk. Oh, Steven. Quick last word. We are shutting down the stream.
What's the topic?
Anarchism and Christianity.
I'm compatible.
We're post-literate. You got to read it for him, Luke.
Now you're supposed to kick
what I've been
me.
trying to combat.
Didn't you kick Chad out?
No. Chad left because he was roboting.
That's all he was doing. I don't have any last words.
Okay, but another plug too for
I don't have any audio either.
Maybe you can't hear us.
No. See if I can get you back. Oh, I've got a couple of you, but not all of you. Forget it.
Okay, so Stephen did have on Rigel's last stream, I think. There's a great section where he talked about smells and incense and stuff, which was really great. So check that out. All right, that's it. Bye, everyone. Let's go out with Jeff's. Should we do it? We'll do a Chad since he was here. Chad's branding, and then we'll go away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. I left 9 comments on the Glenn Sunshine conversation. And he did his whole randos in the end. Nice. Good work. Let's see. I left. Let's count.